want your freedom. Well, who am I to keep you down? We saw the one day should play the way you feel. We saw carefully to the sound of your own redness like a pocket trash man. Still that's up.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
All right, welcome everybody to our Daily Gun Show. We come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern, and we talk about guns. And unlike some of the other chats out there, we drop links. So if you want to join in the conversation, that's what we're here for. To have a conversation each evening. So just that erstwhile's out there. I didn't realize you're in the hospital, so I didn't know about that. I saw a couple of things on your channel, so I figured you're still over there working or what. But saying back at home good for now. It's good to hear. So yeah, that little thing you did with the edge cutter, that was pretty handy. You could probably do something like that, like a like they do with like a miter thing, where you just have a grinder or something laying there, and then like a little bracket for the hand grinder just lay in, and then hold like something up that you can just plow through like that. Anyhow, so we'll see. Like I say, we don't have a script for this show. We just start the show live every night at midnight. I'm working on doing a midday show. In fact, I got a bunch of stuff up on the screen here. I guess I'll close a lot of it down because it's too difficult to edit video. What's plugged in and what isn't? Okay, it's too difficult to edit video while you're trying to do a podcast, at least for me. So I have to make sure. I think I can just close this. Make sure I'm not losing any saved stuff. So I cut everything short today to start the show on time. We'll see if anybody shows up. Sure, not losing any saved. I don't know if they're getting worked or not right now. We go live every night at the same time, and we sell out links. So this is a conversation. You're welcome to join it. Or if nobody shows up, I go do other things. It's pretty hot right now for some reason in Arizona. It's like record heat, literally. The hottest it's ever been. Not even, I mean, it might have been hotter before, but not before 1920 when they started keeping records. So historically, this is the hottest year that's ever been. So it's like 101 or something again today. And it's just annoying. It's hot. So really can't do stuff. I don't have air conditioning or anything. So anyway, I flip things around. This is like my noon. I've been up since mid-afternoon is like my morning. And then I do this show as sort of like my lunchtime break. And then I'll start doing other stuff. So if anybody jumps in, we'll have a conversation. And if nobody jumps in, we'll end it here and I'll go back to work. So occasionally I'll jump over to one of our projects, the Gun Calendars website, guncalendars.com. And today, well, there's all kinds of stuff happening. What's going on? I thought today was a dead day. So, yeah, we have Lonnie Johnson. So I guess I do have a video for that. Just watch that video, I guess. Find it. Let's go look for it. Where is it? It's in this folder, and then this folder, and then down to October 6th. I guess yesterday was the 5th, we were doing it for the day before, so that makes sense. And if anybody's out there, let me know if you can hear it.
GunCalendars.com, where we attempt to archive our daily firearms history. If you know something that we're missing from the calendar, please let us know. And today is October 6th, and we're taking a look at the calendar. We have the anniversary of the birth of Lonnie Johnson. He's a rocket scientist and inventor of the Super Soaker. Pretty interesting story. He was in the Air Force, went to work for NASA as a rocket scientist. Was doing some stuff with nozzles or air pressure or something, if I remember the story correctly, and thought about how that could be applied to a toy. And created, my image here isn't real great, but that's really a 2-liter bottle and some PVC. And he created the first Super Soaker in the 80s, 1986, and it was rebranded as on to make a bunch of money. It took over in the toy business just after the battery-powered squirt guns started to hit the market that looked a lot like real guns, and this was the perfect alternative. It removed the battery and it stopped. It quit looking like a real gun, and it just hit the market. And it was amazing success. Still amazing success today, and pretty interesting aspect of firearms history. So today is the day that Lonnie Johnson's born, the anniversary or the birthday of the guy who invented the Super Soaker. So again, we try to keep the calendar full, so that ideally we'd have something here every single day. If you know something that we're missing, please let us know. Thanks for watching.
There you go, little presentation for the Kun calendars thing. That would be part of the daily, the daytime version of the show, basically. All right, so got a couple of people joining in. We'll see if they join the conversation or if they're just kind of weird observers. And let's see, Noah there. I don't really follow news. I've been working on some projects here. Let's take a look at the Bannerman Castle. So this is over on Gun Shop Guide. If you go over to the Firearms Museum section and you scroll down to the castle, where would I have what's the logo for the castle over there? No, I just have this little thing, these little stamps I made. Anyway, when you click on the Bannerman thing, wherever you happen to find it, it'll be a couple of different places, actually. You'll get to this page, and this is just the timeline. So he's born, moves to Brooklyn as a little Lynn, 2 years old. Let's see. I guess when he was 24, his first kid is born. He started running the junk business when he was about 20. But his dad had started. I think he was working at it when he was like 14 or something. In 1880, he buys his first serious purchase of ordnance, and that's when he figures out buying stuff at surplus metal scrap prices, and then selling it as old used product is worth, makes money. And that lets him buy more surplus, and that lets him sell more. And it was a winning deal. You just had to hold on to it. That's the trick. You have to hold on to it until a buyer comes along. So it costs something to maintain the inventory somewhere, and then to provide that inventory to the most number of customers, especially when you're buying a whole bunch of certain items, like a canteen or some kind of strap that goes around a horse, or a plate for the mess hall or something, or like a gun or a particular bullet. You're buying a lot of each thing. So you had to figure out a way to hold all that stuff and to make it available to customers as much as possible. So his first catalog was in 1884, and from what I understand, that was one of the first catalogs. So he was getting in on a new thing, innovation, technology, printing. When did the printing press come around? Like when, maybe that was at the beginning there. That's an interesting aspect I'm going to still dig into. Anyway, he started printing catalogs, and I don't have a picture of this first one, but a reproduction of it looks something like this. It doesn't look like that exactly, though. And then started printing. Well, his first one was handwritten, and it was 11 pages. And then he started making larger ones, thicker ones, I guess. And these were catalogs of the items that he had purchased that were for sale or whatever. And that was working. And then he eventually purchased a building that he would use for a shotgun factory, because he buys Spencer Arms in 1890. And then starts kicking out a catalog. He's kind of doing multiple things at this point. He moves to bigger and different locations in New York City. So now he moves to a couple of different locations, I guess. I don't know New York enough. Keeps coming out with catalogs. Winchester sues him over the pump shotgun. I think he loses a bunch of money. See, that's like a whole nother story. I just have like a headline of it here. Back, I wasn't the patient our kid was, but me and the wife have been staying up. Oh, okay, I didn't realize. Right on. So yeah, sorry about that. Sorry to hear. Hopefully everything's going good. And well, at least I've heard some stories that because of everything's kind of slow right now, that people are getting first-class treatment. So hopefully that's the case. So they kept moving around. I believe getting into bigger and bigger locations, big locations that were more accessible, I guess. They started out, I guess, by the waterfront, so that his location would be easy to transport things where he found them to have them somewhere, warehouse them. But then he started to figure out it's better to have the stuff where people are and not where it's just cheap to have land. Or there might have been other reasons. I know that I heard something about a highway coming through and knocking down the Broadway location. So if something else, some other influence came along and forced him to move, that's a whole other area of interest to research here. So at some point, he takes a bunch of stuff to the New York Sportsman's exhibition and bicycle show, which was a big deal because then people became aware of him, I guess. That was in 1898. Then he acquires by silent auction pretty much 90-something%, almost everything from the Spanish-American War, like 200,000 Mausers and 30 million rounds of ammo. And that's just the guns and ammo. But like literally everything for every horse, everything for every soldier, so every boot, belt buckle, and leather belt, and clothes, everything. He gets all that stuff from the losers who just all put it down and walked away. He basically pays the government to go in and just take it all away. So he takes all that stuff, and there's all kinds of different scenarios of what happened, but I suspect he just had so much stuff he had to figure out a bigger place to put it, and he didn't need more warehouse space in costly New York, and it's not necessarily smart to put all this explosive stuff right in the middle of the city. So he's looking around, and there's some kind of story that he was out with his wife on a boat, or there's other stories, but basically he becomes aware of Polypel Island, which is almost a 7-acre island, 6-acre island on the Hudson River, just about half a mile or a mile from West Point, just north of New York City. Now there's a train that goes right by there. I don't know if the train went right by there back in the day. But certainly found it and bought it from an old lady who owned it, and she was sick. She only owned it because people were going over there and having parties on it. So she bought it to stop that from happening because she was against it. So she sold it to him and said, as long as you don't have parties on there, you can have this island. So he buys it from some rich lady and starts building a little house for his employees, basically, and then a warehouse. And since it's a rocky island, he starts taking black powder and different munitions that he has and taking them apart and using the explosives inside this different ordnance that he's got to just start blasting away this chunk of the island. So he blasts away this chunk of the island to make a flat area, and then he creates basically an ammo bunker there for the ordnance, and then a warehouse for all the other stuff. And they're separated by a couple hundred yards of flat land over here. Now the ammo place is gone because it blew up 20 years later in 1920, but up until then there would have been a big building sort of over here, I guess. So he starts building this warehouse, and then at some point he starts painting his name on the side of the warehouse. It is on Hudson River, so people are taking the boat back and forth in front of it. Eventually they make this railroad. I don't know when the railroad was made. And then so he paints his name on the side, and it's a billboard for him. So instead of just being boring, he makes it into a castle. He's from Scotland, after all. He grew up there. He was born there. So he makes it like, in this area of the Hudson River, looks like Scotland, from what I'm told. So he builds this Scottish kind of looking castle. He literally just makes drawings on napkins and backs of menus and shit, and gives it to his guys, and then they just build the castle according to his plans or what. So he's having a good time, and he's building this thing, and it's half presentation and half just fun, right? His family lives on an island during the summers and enjoys having a big castle. And it also warehouses, all the stuff from the Spanish-American War. He's done that for other wars. And then he's able, with all this inventory, to outfit civil wars. He's not civil wars, but revolutions. I guess civil wars, if you count. It depends on if you call a revolution a civil war. But he wasn't necessarily an instigator, but he was a nice guy. He wasn't a warmonger. So if there was somebody who was in need or a losing side, he would outfit them. So he would sell them munitions according to the government would determine if it was okay, if it was legal to sell, like the U.S. government would determine. And then he'd sell to the good guys. And he would often give away crutches and stretchers and first aid type equipment to people that were getting wailed on somewhere or another. And he got in trouble for that. A lot of times that was called war something or another, like aiding one side of a war was considered a thing. So sometimes he got scrutinized, I think, for aiding people. But that's a whole other thing, like his use of his empire or his resources. Anyhow, he builds this castle, this warehouse. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, and then eventually 5 pieces to it as it grows over 18 years. So he builds it starting in about 1900, and then he dies in 1908 or 1918, and that's when it stops being built. So during that time with the castle, of course, now he's got the castle, he's got the catalogs that have been going out, he's got the locations in downtown New York City. He's got a reputation for having a lot of cool stuff. He's created Army Navy surplus store. He's created that whole concept. Until he came along, everyone would buy stuff from the military as brass or steel. They would melt it down and it would become railroad tracks or I-beams. He's the first one that said, hey, instead of melting down these things, why don't we just sell them as used rifles or sell them as used canteens or sell them as used crutches? So he did that. He would buy a canteen. He would buy a canteen for a penny. And then from the Army as surplus, for that weight in aluminum or metal or whatever it is. And then sell it for 10 cents. And you make 9 cents doing that. And, you make a lot of money because there's a lot of Boy Scouts. There's a lot of campers that, be like, yeah, I'll take that canteen. There's nothing wrong with it. Same thing with bayonets and boots. And I guess if you notice, a lot of marching bands have uniforms that look like military uniforms. Well, that's because they would buy their uniforms from Bannerman, and he would get those uniforms from France or from Spain or whatever. And that's basically what he did, is he outfitted, parade band, what was those things called? Marching bands. He would outfit Buffalo Bill back in the old days for his shows, like if he needed a whole regiment of stuff. For a long time, Bannerman had the most Gatling guns. As soon as the U.S. government switched from Gatling guns to machine guns, thanks to Browning, Bannerman bought all the Gatling guns from the U.S. Army. He owned all of them. So for a little while there, until Bannerman started selling them, he owned all the Gatling guns in the world, basically. No one wanted them. So one guy started buying Gatling guns from Bannerman. He would buy one, I guess the story goes, and then sell it. Or he bought the first one and sold it. Then he bought 2, sold them. Then he bought 4 and sold them. And before you know it, all the Gatling guns were gone and distributed out to individuals. And a lot of those either went to whoever, people that bought them, or you see them in front of places, as display pieces. Anyway, all those had to come from Bannerman, basically. There might be a stray here and there, but most of them went right through Bannerman. That's the same with a lot of cannons and other artillery pieces. There have been fads or trends where people will put a cannon or a artillery piece in front of their VFW hall or in front of a hospital or the library. And this is one of the places, well, it was pretty much the place. He had the facilities, and imagine, again, there might be outliers where somebody was able to buy a cannon or something off the government, but most of the time Bannerman could pay a little bit more than the next guy because he knew he was going to make it in the markup, and he had a place to put him. He had his own island, arsenal. So yeah, for quite a while there, he was the wheeler and dealer. It was for 18 years or whatever. It wasn't forever. And he kept putting out these catalogs. Well, the catalogs became the collecting. Like there was no such thing as collecting. No one knew what stuff was until all of a sudden there's this, I don't know, 300 page. It got to be pretty big. Got to be in 1906, 300 pages. Gets to 420 pages by 13. He didn't really take things out of the catalog, I guess. He would leave everything in there because he was never sure that they wouldn't just find another case of something in the castle somewhere. They might discover in the warehouse something that they thought they were out of. So he just left everything in the catalog, so it just got bigger and bigger. So it became a collector's guide. And I guess it maxed out just under 500 pages. And, that's an accumulation of capitalism, reselling and, making a couple of bucks, but also redistributing history and putting things into people's hands, which is magic. It's just really neat. The potential of a pickaxe or a saddle or something that was made for one thing and then being able to be used for something else. I mean, that whole concept is all due to this guy figuring out a cool way to make a couple of bucks and to, at the same time, try to prevent future violence. So one of the reasons he was doing the castle, I suspect, was to have a place that was a place to do these kind of things, a place that people could talk about. So he would bring people, he'd bring kids to the island to have adventures and to spend time, kids from New York. He would, as he built the thing, it wasn't really open to the public, but he was building a museum, or they suspect he was building a museum in the top floors. So the idea was to have the Museum of the Lost Arts, and he had acquired everything from like primitive weaponry, spears and clubs and hammers and old-fashioned type of bashing each other type of weapons from all over the place, literally all over the world. He accumulated a lot of that stuff. That was a big part of the catalog, was looking at this categorizing of, or catalogization, I don't know what the writers, of all these different axes and tomahawks and spears and stuff. And he knew where he got them, so he wrote down on there. I mean, I don't know if anybody in a science school was ever paying attention to weapons, at least not in a way of actually knowing what weapons are. So he had all kinds of neat stuff, and part of that, from what I suspect, was to create a museum to let people know, once wars were over, what they were all about, and to let people know things like Gatling guns. Remember, the Gatling gun was built to end war, and he wanted to help with that concept of prevention of atrocity through awareness of how the consequences and all the rest. So I suspect that part of the castle was to attract like not just awareness but interest, and then at some point facilitate getting people in there. Who knows what he would have ended up doing, and who knows if his kids would have had the same inspiration. I don't know what the situation was between him and his kids, but they certainly didn't have the inspiration to keep creating like he did. So I don't know if he did that in spite of their whatever, but I don't know if they begrudgingly kept the company going or if they were enthusiastic. I'd be curious to find out. Again, that's another aspect of it. Let's see. So I don't know where we were at. We were somewhere on counting the pages. So he gets all those guns. He keeps the catalog going. Let's, I guess, get to where, well, we didn't talk about the, I guess first he dies. So we get the catalog. It gets pretty big. Right before he dies, the government sends some people to his island, to Polypel Island, to invade and to investigate. I guess one of the groundskeepers there, or an employee, was like some country. I don't know what the hell country he was from. Let's say Russia, because they're always the culprits. So some guy was something, and the government or some enemy of Bannerman, somebody told the government, hey, he's got a spy working for him, and you don't want a spy working for this guy. So they basically went to the island, and they had 19 people there screwing around, and it got pissed about that. He was super old, and he was not in good health. So he sues the government for basically the lodging for these fuckers. They're sleeping at his place and eating his food. So he sends them a bill, basically. They did, of course, say that he's innocent. They figured out there's nothing shady going on. It's just that, I got a guy who's Russian or whatever, and he works for me. So go screw yourself. They left, and he sent them a bill. And then I guess that turned into a big thing. A couple other times, basically, they would sell him cannons as scrap. We don't want these pieces of metal anymore, so you can have them for whatever, legitimate bid you put in. So let's say he buys them for $10 a pound. All right, we're buying these cannons for $10 a pound. And you're giving them to us like after they've been sitting around your stupid armories forever and everybody scrapped every piece they want off of them and they're broken and whatever. And, they're missing parts. So they're not like operable cannons or nothing. You're just giving us the metal, assuming we're going to melt it down. And that's why you're selling it to us at melting it down type of prices. So I'm willing to take it away and do that, government. And the government says, good. And they're done. Then a couple years later, they're like, oh shit, we need cannons really bad because of some reason. So Bannerman's like, well, in the meantime, I bought these things off of you for scrap, and then I put new carriages under it, and I got them working again. And I was planning on selling them to, like, I don't know, wherever, Bulgaria or, Nigeria or, I don't know, whatever, Belgium or something. I don't know how he's going to sell these cannons to. And the government's like, oh, no, sell them to us. And he's like, all right, here's some price. And then they're like, no problem. I think that's how it went down. And then after the war's over, or after they got done needing them, they're like, you know what? We don't like that price. We think you gouged us because you bought them off of us for way cheaper. And then I think that was basically this big to do back in the day. I don't know about that again. That would be another thing to look into. I really don't think that the guy was out there gouging everybody, but he was making money. What the hell is wrong with making money? And the government's the sad, what do they call that when you sell something and then you regret it and you blame the other guy for buying it off you? It's one of them kind of situations. So anyway, he's not in good health. I don't have it in here. I think he died from some sort of cancer or something that we wouldn't die from, like an ulcer. He died from like something that wasn't that bad now. But he was in the old days and he was 70. So maybe it was corona. Hospital was A++, all the blah, blah, blah. It was kind of strange, though. Yeah, that's got to be annoying as shit. Although in a hospital, half of that stuff is probably already there, especially if somebody's vulnerable, right? So it's probably only like 2 levels higher for a hospital, really. But I don't know. Let's see. Then we got 3 sons. 2 of them stayed in the business, these 2. And these are pictures from one of the catalogs. They take over the business and it becomes known as Bannerman's Sons. So before it was just called, I think, Bannerman. And then at some point, I think it becomes Bannerman and Sons. But then it just becomes Bannerman's Sons, like, because he's not there anymore. So then they hire this guy and he hangs out Broadway on, out in New York City running things. And the island is, there's their warehouse. Nobody really goes there except for the company. They use it for their own things, but since the old man, the dad, isn't buying things anymore, he was the one that traveled the world buying stuff and really selling stuff or getting stuff sold. Since he's not out there buying stuff, there's nothing new coming to the castle, I suspect. So instead, it's just a matter of grabbing stuff when they need it to restock shelves in the city. I don't know, but they sell stuff from the island. But no further construction after he dies, and no development of the company. It's really just starts to dwindle and sell the inventories. So they hired this guy, and from what I understand, it was really a thing between his death, so between like World War I and World War II, to go to Bannerman's and to hang out, because this guy, it was basically like walking through a museum, except everything was for sale. And I don't think anything really cost that much. He never changed the prices, so if he bought something for a nickel and he was selling it for $3, 70 years later it was still $3. Like he never changed the prices because he didn't need to. So it was still, it was still a working business in that crazy scheme. So in that way it was interesting too, and there might be some interesting economic way to look at this whole thing. So let's see, he remains there working for 30 years. So again, I think there's a whole thing of people who used to go hang out there and become collectors and get interested. There was a lot of different stuff that came through the whatever you want to call it, the business or the collection. So let's see, we get to a smaller catalog in 1920. So in 1920, in August of 1920, the place where they kept all the black powder and a lot of the munitions and stuff, that place blew up. Nobody knows why, spark or something. It blew up on the island, but took out windows like for 4 miles or something. Like it just, everyone knew that that place blew up. It blew, the shrapnel was a bunch of munitions, so it threw like 400-pound shells out into the lake or whatever, into the river, onto the island and stuff. So from 1920 onward, the island is dangerous to navigate on. Unless you're on a trap path or something, it's possible that you're going to step on some ancient munition, an old cannonball full of explosives or whatever, because it's just a chaotic, random, distribution of all of this ordnance that was in this big warehouse that just blew up one afternoon. So it was in the afternoon, and his wife, who, it was just a couple years after he died, his wife was up there laying in her hammock, and I guess she went inside to get some lemonade or something. The thing blew up. She comes back outside to see what the hell just happened, and there was some big giant rock or some chunk of metal in her hammock. So she luckily didn't die that day, but I don't think anybody died, but certainly caused a lot of damage to the castle, and they never fixed it. All they did is board up the windows, and they didn't fix nothing though. So there's a whole other thing about the castle. There was a competitor, an unscrupulous arms dealer who was selling a bunch of ammunition to somebody in South America, and Bannerman heard of it. And when the government seized the guy's shipment of ammunition, it was in barrels, and they seize it all, and then once they go to sell it, as evidence is now being sold, Bannerman buys it, and it was like 6 inches of concrete in a barrel, with the other 2 foot of the barrel was full of ammo. So he gets a ton of ammo, all these barrels, and all this concrete. So he starts making his castle out of that concrete, and of course that concrete's like the worst concrete in the world, because the people that bought it only bought it to cover up their illicit ammo sale. So they just bought whatever garbage concrete they could find. So he's a cheapskate, and that costs him in the end, because after that explosion, it became evident that the castle wasn't going to be there forever. Like, it wasn't built to last. So then you get an anniversary catalog in 1925, a couple of other anniversary catalogs. So I'm still doing the research on this, but I suspect somewhere in here is when the catalog stopped coming out. They quit making new ones because, again, they quit buying new inventory, and they start to get smaller. So I suspect they start to pull out some of the stuff that they know they don't have. And so it's a new catalog, but it's really just a thinner, slimmer catalog, maybe. So these are things that are available on eBay. And the way I've been trying to keep track is by just watching eBay auctions. So every time an eBay auction comes up, or not every time, but every time I have time to look, I'll go explore eBay auctions. And if I find an eBay auction for one of the catalogs I don't have, I got a new picture and I know what the catalog's going to look like. And every once in a while, I'll find a catalog that I didn't know existed. So from my research, these are the catalogs. Most of these headings here are different catalogs. I just haven't seen them ever, but I know that certain ones exist from doing research and stuff. So they keep putting out catalogs, but it's because they're just reducing inventory. They're selling everything off. This is through the 30s, and I guess, like I said, this was a prime time. Like, people really dug the surplus and the company. They would go down and hang out at the store. Again, it was like a museum, except you could just grab something and take it up front and buy it. They do another couple of anniversaries. The island itself is a whole nother story. Besides the island, you can see in this photo pretty good that he owned 6 acres of water around it, and they said the only way you can own that water is if you put up some way to determine that it's yours. So he went in and he just bought a bunch of barges, and he would take a barge and fill it with rocks, and then it would sink, and then he would take another barge, fill it with rocks on top of it, and it would sink, and he kept doing that until they would be at the top of the water. And then he did that enough that he would fill rocks all around the top of that. Then he filled it with, or he capped the whole thing with concrete and put in all these places where you could hang out and go swimming or tie a boat up to it. So it's like a useful, I don't know, maybe 10-foot wide kind of wall in the water. And then he had these turrets on it. and this is a big ass dock. So it was a breakwater. You could come in here and you'd have a breakwater from the currents and shit, but also it gave him a boundary of his whole little area there. So he never quite finished all that. He got quite a bit done in 16 years, though. He built a castle that was technically 5 stories tall, made up of like 5 different warehouses. When he died, he still had the ammunition battery, and then of course this whole like 6-acre breakwater going on with trees and stuff on it. So pretty amazing, pretty cool. You can see all from this angle is like from the air above the railroad track. So from the railroad track, you got a view of this, but from the ground, not from this high end angle. So that's a nice aerial view of it, though, in their 1945 catalog, I guess. 1947 catalog, you see the castle. This would have been if you came in the breakwater and came in right in here, which is where like a company or a guest would dock. This is what you'd come out to, a really nice looking castle with guest quarters on the left and a moat and a drawbridge and a whatever that giant gate is called. It's like a door that's a gate. There's a name for that. So at some point, this guy Hogan takes over the business or being the manager of the Broadway store. Later on, when the whole thing crumbles in 1967, he'll take over the name and the company, but it won't be a company anymore, but he'll buy it so that it doesn't disappear. Some of their last catalogs come out. The island stops being used as a warehouse at this point in the 1950s. Remember, the World War II just happened right in here too, so not much happened because people weren't paying attention to this kind of stuff during World War II. So the island stops being used. The family still owns it. They go out there and have summers or whatever, but there's always a staff at the warehouse, but they basically remove everything from it, bring it all to Long Island and have some place on Long Island. Let's see, you get the 90th catalog already, 90th anniversary of the catalog coming out in 1955. So it's definitely been coming out for a long time. In the summer of 1958, somebody comes in and supposedly removes all the live projectiles from the island, but they still find them. So it's impossible. It's a rocky island, and things, when they were exploded, they came in and plunged into the ground. So they'll become exposed with rain and, it's called erosion. So most of them were removed. It's still dangerous to walk around on the island, though. Let's see, they closed the business completely in 1959, sell off most of the inventory. They give pieces to the Smithsonian, probably pieces that were part of the museum on the top floor, that Museum of the Lost Arts from the dad. Let's see, everything was moved to Long Island. I guess that was in 1958. And then at that point, this guy named Mark figured out that the company just took everything and threw it in the garbage. So he went in and took all the stuff out of the garbage and literally salvaged some of the paperwork that would have been lost. Some of the drawings of the castle that were on the back of menus, like all the stuff, like these people were just crazy. They threw it all away. I guess this guy heard that they were doing it. He grabbed it all from the garbage and had it for a while. There was another, now the reprints of the catalogs are nothing to do with the family, and I suspect just rogue. I don't know, but I'm guessing people just appreciated it and said, let's make another copy because the other copies that exist are 60 years old and they were made on newspaper. So let's make them on regular paper and, sell them. I don't know if the family had anything to do with that or not. It does say Francis Bannerman's Sons, Inc., so maybe they did. I don't know. Anyway, the family then turns the island over to the Rockefeller Foundation, and they have it for a while. Another 100th anniversary, another catalog comes out, a rebinding basically of the first catalog. Then they sell the island to the state of New York. So now it's no longer the families anymore. The island is the state of New York's, and it's still a castle, and it's still in decent shape. The castle was made out of concrete and rocks, and then the concrete was that shitty concrete. The wood, though, when they would sink these barges to make the outside, he would take the wood off the barges and make the floors and the joists and shit out of that wood because he's cheap. And that wood is soaked in creosote, so it wouldn't get destroyed in the ocean and in the water. So that wood is like soaked in flammable resin. It had to be horrible in there with all that like cosmoline and shit on the stuff, and all the wood in there being from creosote smoke soaked wood that had already been a barge that was sold for scrap, because he wasn't buying brand new barges. He was buying barges that were at the end of their life. So the floors and joists and everything, all the wood inside of these buildings was made out of wood that had already lived its whole life. So the state of New York owns it now. So of course they go ahead and they start to restore this thing so that history isn't lost, and that no one has to wonder what it was. No, they don't do that. They burn it down. So they basically send in a fucker to burn it down, because they own it now and they don't want anybody to get hurt. So they burn it down. They burn the floors out of it. All they do is light a match. The floors burn out of it. It burns for like 6 days. You can see it for miles and whatever. And they just sat there, watched it burn. And then when it's all burnt, all that concrete and rock is just, what is that called? When you just cook the shit out of concrete and rock, it's brittle. It's probably all cooked out. So since the 60s, I'm sure that rock has just been taking a pounding with the elements and the freeze-thaw cycle that they got in New York. Right on, is the Hudson saltwater? I didn't stick my hand in it. It might have been saltwater, or if it's not, it's brackish because it's stuck to the ocean. So then you got Bannerman name being sold to Hogan, the guy who was managing the business. He buys the names because the kids obviously don't give a shit anymore, I guess. I guess it burns for 3 days, sorry. Let's see, then a couple of these books came out, which are kind of neat. I just found these on eBay the other day. But there's one that came out in 1969, and then another one will come out in 1994. And they are just compilations. Basically, people took pieces of the big catalog and that were just all the inspector's marks and put them together into separate little books. It's just they cost too much for me to buy, otherwise I'd have one. I'll find one eventually at a gun show for cheap and grab it, but it's just pages out of the bigger catalog bound separately. Then you get another reprint of the 1907 catalog, which is pretty interesting because I've never seen the 1907 cover. This is actually the cover. Looks kind of neat. And there's another cover that's similar with less swords and shit. The 1903 or something. I don't know if I have a picture of it in here. The 1903 looks really similar, but very like half the swords or whatever these are, rifles and stuff. Anyhow, so this company comes along, and I just barely found out about this one through eBay also. I've never seen this book yet. But obviously, multiple reprints of the catalog, because the catalog is literally the beginning of a buyer's guide for militaria. Everything from horse saddlery to Civil War hatchery to World War I glovery and knights and shining armor type of shit. Stuff from boats and ships. There's all the stuff from the bands, all these flags, like everything that the military would have had back in the old days. I mean, I've been in government situations like this where they blow the whistle and it's like, you're not getting paid anymore. Literally, people just drop what's in their hands and walk away. I've been on fires where people just drop their shovels and walk away because everything that they did there was paid for by Uncle Sam, and it's not worth dragging it back to the truck. Like, they just leave the shovel because they don't want to drag it all the way back to the truck because they're going to get a new shovel when they get back, and they're going to have to throw that shovel away anyway. So it's ridiculous the way that some of this bureaucracy works. And people have never experienced it think I'm joking. So anyway, yeah, neat to see all the different stuff that was, ever produced, kind of archived by necessity, just because he had it all. And he had to say, hey, look, we got this shovel and we got that shovel and we got the other shovel. Or we got this guy's vest and we got this guy's hat and we got this guy's gloves and his boots and his pants. We got everything. And we got multiple sizes of it all. And some of the stuff didn't have sizes. Back in the day, everybody just got pants. They were either big on you or they were tight on you, but everybody just got pants. So I bet you back in the day it was a little easier to have a complete uniform. Anyhow, so then you get this catalog, the 1927. This is the one I grew up on. This one is from 1980, and I looked at this catalog pretty much all the time forever because there was no internet, and this was everything cool ever. So this was a pretty neat thing. You can get these for 50 cents, and you can get these for $50. So keep your eyes open, and I wouldn't pay more than $10 for it. It's as big as a phone book though, so it'll cost you something to get it shipped to you. Then in 1993, the Bannerman Trust comes along. Basically, a bunch of people that used to root around the island and liked going to the island, and were sick of people going to the island and ruining it, decided let's do something to get some authority to keep assholes off the island and keep the island from falling apart, keep the castle from falling apart. And thank you for them, because they did that, and now there's some procedure for the island. It's now in the hands of people that actually care. And they're not perfect, but they're definitely not assholes like the olden days. Let's see. So then, 2003, somebody builds. Let's go back to that picture. Somebody will build a set of like a dock over here, and this is the north side. So this is Pennsylvania. This is New York. The Hudson goes this way. West Point would be over here. This is north. When I came to it, there's a road over here that has like a bridge across the river. We parked over here, met up with John Z, and took a boat to case you down here to right under here on the north side of the island. And then, unfortunately, it just takes you right back. So I never got to go look around. But that's the dock that they're talking about being built in 2003. Then in 2004, they open it up for tours. They become friends of the New York State Parks. In other words, they get like the authority over the island, a bunch of stuff. So people start to really take care of the island. They start to put together the gardens again. We didn't talk about the guy's house. He had built a house for the family, and it's kind of up on top of the hill here, on top of the island. So you walk up like a couple of different trails will take you up to the house. And then the house has some gardens right around it, but down in this little bay over here, they call it, I think it's called Wee Bay. Down here, I think it's named after his granddaughters or something like that. Down, if you walk from the house down to it, there's some other gardens down there, and that's what his wife would do, make those gardens. So one of the first things they did after getting the authority to bring people to the tour of the island was to kind of clean up and replant the gardens. And I believe they did that, and you can even buy the seeds, but they did that with literally the same seed stock that she had. That was available. They regrew the gardens from the original Miss Bannerman's garden. That's kind of cool. And I think you can even buy seeds. I might have even bought seeds from there. I think I did. I think I have seeds from there. Or if I didn't, I would have if I had the money. I just don't remember, honestly, for the life of me. That was a couple of years ago now. Let's see. So then they get the gardens going again. Then they bring some West Point people in who are just a little while away, and it's like service projects or something, like the engineering students at West Point start doing projects on the island. The first one, I think, was a watering system in 2009. There's a natural spring, I think, on the island. So they hooked that up so that they could water the gardens, I expect, and get some water for the people on doing the tours and things. But in 2009, about half of the damn thing falls apart. Most of these pictures are showing you either the working castle or the castle after the fire, where all the floors are missing, but the walls are in good shape. Like this is the working castle. This, I'm pretty sure, is the castle. You can see so many holes through it. This is probably after the floors burned out of it. Well, that happened in 1969. In 1990 or in 2009, like 2.5 of the walls fall down. So that's where you get the existing, well, basically, these are the only walls that exist anymore. All the other walls that you don't see in this image are the ones that fell down. So that was discouraging. And that's when I started getting an urgency to want to go see this thing. So in 2012, I attempted to get there because I figured it was going to fall down. And it was ultimately frustrating when we got to really close to there that we ended up not going the rest of the way to New York. Anyhow, I didn't get back in there to see it myself until 2018, no, 17. I think 17. So in 2009, half the walls fall down. So in 2011, they raised enough money to put a bunch of braces. So a bunch of aluminum and metal braces are holding the existing walls up now. And that happened, or that was completed, I guess, in 14. Then right before I went, the West Point's cadets went back and built a little bridge. It's difficult to see in any pictures because of the trees and stuff, but this mountain is very rocky. So there's a couple of trails that have existed for a lot of years, but everything else is just not quite boulders, but big rocks and changes in terrain and stuff. And these trees and stuff kind of mask how rocky and craggy the island is. So you can't even hardly tell that there's a really sharp kind of valley or whatever you'd call like a draw over here right behind the house. And then there's this other hill over here where if you want to go look at the rest of the river, you have to walk way the hell over here to get over there. So there's in the olden days, the Bannerman had just built a bridge that was kind of like a tree fort, I guess. It was literally just nailed to the trees. And that worked fine for, the few years that he was around. But then the trees kept growing and that bridge was gone after a while. So the West Point cadets built something based on pictures that was very similar. At least from what I understand, they built something permanent that has the feeling or the appearance or the look of the original bridge that was there. So now when you go there, they'll, like when I went with John Z, you can take a couple of different tours. The tour that we took comes down in a boat with maybe 20 to 50 people, maybe. It can hold quite a few people. You get off at this dock and they tell you there's nothing to see here, keep walking. So you go up the hill from that dock and there's literally nothing to see there. It's just the brand new dock and it's boring. So you just go, and there's like a sign that kind of gives you some things to look at on the island. You walk up this really high staircase and then that gets you about halfway up the island. You walk over a little ways and then you have some decisions to make, but you kind of walk up halfway the island, then you kind of look at the castle straight across, and there's some views there that you can see it. And then there's like a couple of different pathways that are going to take you up to the house, to the gardens over here. And that's about it. And then to that area that the bridge takes you to. So what they'll do is they'll have a person staged at different places around the island who kind of works with the tour or, volunteer on the island. And they tell you the stories that they know. And they're all different because they're all different humans that have different interests. So it was pretty awesome. And I didn't figure that out right away. But I went here and listened to like everything this guy had to say. And then I walked over here and was like, oh, they're saying different stuff. Went down here and I'm like, dang, I got to hear this other guy. So I came over here because the time was killing me. So I heard everything one guy had to say. And then like a little bit, and like maybe a quarter or a half of what this guy had to say. So you'd have to probably go back a couple of times. And if I didn't miss somebody, I don't think I missed anybody. There's no trails on this side of the island. There's nothing over here. I guess I could zoom in since it's a shitty tiny image. There's really nothing over here. This is wild. In fact, most of the island, pretty much everything like this is from here is wild. But over here, there's a couple of different trails and things. So I imagine there's like benches, and because, he built this island to enjoy it. So there's little places you can just sit and look at like beautiful scenery. Like if you were sitting on the island looking out, you'd have these little view spots. So there might be these volunteers at these different areas telling you different things. But it doesn't really look like this today anymore. All of this wall really is gone. There's just a couple of places like where this bridge was that still pokes through the water. And then one of these things pokes through the water, and that's it. I don't know if there's a super high or low tide. It's possible that at low tide you might see more, but I really don't think so. I haven't seen any pictures that show it good like that. Anyway, that's about all there was for it. But I've been researching not just that, but trying to get some of the pieces. The overall, I think I got, but getting the pieces together has been the weekend project here. Some of the pieces together. This has been quite a while to get all this together, but just been adding some of the details to it. That's about it though. So then you get into just some of the specifics about it. And this is pretty much my notes. I've got a couple of projects I'm working on, and this is my place where I'm keeping track of the timeline and and I'll keep a place to add even more notes as I find them. All right, with that, we have talked for an hour. Nobody's jumped in, so we're done. I don't like doing this, and gave me an opportunity to speak about all this stuff. Again, I've talked about it before, but yeah, I kind of figured somebody would jump in. Thanks, Bob, for jumping around. I haven't seen you in a while. Sorry again, I really didn't know that Kip was having something, so hope everything is good there. And then, yeah, DJ was out there. Yeah, there's even more. The Bannerman Island thing is even better. Like, I haven't even added the fun stuff. The Bat Cave comes from Bannerman. The guy who came up with the Bat Cave got the idea from looking at Bannerman from the water. And then there's some other things. There's a couple of movies and things. There's a comic book. And then, well, there's a couple other things I'm still adding. So this is the long-term project for me. And one of these things I sneak some time on the weekends to work on. So nobody jumped in today. We talked about it a little bit. It'll go back into a drawer. And if you want to go check it out, it's on Gun Shop Guide on the museum tab. Because technically it's a museum, I think. All right, I'll quit screen sharing and I'll quit threatening. We'll be back to pick you up later.